Her brothers took everything, but they forgot the equipment shed, the one that had been welded shut since 1954. What I found inside would change not just my future, but the entire story of my family. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button because we're about to dig into what happens when the world counts you out, but leaves you one locked door. The air in the lawyer's office smelled of old paper and even older money. It was a clean, sterile smell, the kind that tries to convince you everything is under control, even when your world is a scattered deck of cards someone just threw in the air. I was 18 years and 3 days old. 2 years of foster care had ended not with a celebration, but with a summons to this mahogany-paneled room. Mr. Caldwell, a man whose suit probably cost more than every piece of clothing I owned, cleared his throat. It was a soft, practiced sound, meant to be gentle, but landing like a pebble dropped down a deep, dark well. "Ilara," he began, folding his hands on the vast, polished desert of his desk. "As you know, with the passing of your 18th birthday, you are now legally an adult. The state's guardianship has concluded." He paused, as if expecting me to thank him for this information. I just sat there, my hands tucked under my legs to stop them from shaking. The chair was leather, and it made a soft, complaining noise every time I shifted. I felt small in it, a borrowed child in a grown-up seat. "This also means," he continued, "that the final disposition of your parents' estate can be concluded. As the sole remaining minor heir at the time of the probate filing, your portion was held in trust." My portion. The word sounded foreign. My parents had died 6 years ago, a blur of flashing lights on a rain-slicked highway. After that, my older brothers, Mark and David, had been my guardians. For a while. That had ended with a different kind of official meeting, one with less mahogany and more fluorescent lighting, where words like unsuitable and neglect were used. Then came the system. 2 years of moving between houses that were never homes. 2 years of learning to be quiet, to be invisible, to expect nothing. Mr. Caldwell slid a sheaf of papers across the desk. The primary asset of the estate was, of course, the family farm. Approximately 200 acres, the main house, and several outbuildings in Stockton County. My breath caught. The farm. I had a jumble of memories, sun-drenched and hazy, of chasing fireflies in the tall grass, of the rough, kind hands of my grandfather, of the smell of hay and damp earth. Those memories were from before, from a time when my family felt like a solid thing. Your brothers, as adults and majority heirs, took control of managing the estate, Mr. Caldwell said, his eyes carefully fixed on a point just over my shoulder. They liquidated most of the tangible assets over the past few years to service the significant debts attached to the property. Tractors, combines, livestock, all sold. He was telling me something without telling me. The careful, professional cadence of his voice was a shield. He was a lawyer, paid to deliver facts, not comfort. "What's left?" I asked. My voice was a whisper, rough from disuse. He finally met my gaze. There was a flicker of something there, pity, maybe, or just professional weariness. "The land itself, Ilara, and the house. I'm afraid both are in a state of considerable disrepair. The property is encumbered by a rather substantial lien for back taxes. In its current state, it's a liability, not an asset." So, that was it. My inheritance was a ruin, a debt. I felt a hollow laugh bubble up in my chest, but I choked it down. Of course, Mark and David had picked the carcass clean and left the bones for me. It was so perfectly them. "Your brothers have made an offer," he said, sliding another single piece of paper forward. It looked stark and lonely on the desk. "They are willing to assume the full tax lien. In exchange, you would sign over your 1/3 interest in the deed." He pushed a pen toward me. "It's a clean break, Ilara. They handle the debt and you walk away free and clear. Frankly, It's the most sensible option. Free and clear. The words echoed in the silent room. I would be free and clear with nothing. The last 2 years had been about waiting for this day, for the moment I would finally be my own person, the moment I could start building something. And here was my foundation, a pile of debt and a pen, offering to let me sign away the last piece of my history for the privilege of starting with zero. I stared at the paper. It was an ultimatum disguised as a kindness. Sign here, little girl. Let the grown-ups handle the mess. Forget the past. Forget that patch of dirt that has your family name on it. Just disappear. Something inside me, a small, stubborn thing that had survived the last 6 years, said no. It wasn't a thought, not really. It was a feeling, a deep, resonant hum of defiance. What about the outbuildings? I asked, my voice a little stronger this time. You said several outbuildings. Mr. Caldwell blinked, surprised by the question. He shuffled through his papers, a faint look of annoyance on his face. He wanted this to be over. He had a golf game, or a lunch, or another, more important client waiting. Ah, yes, the standard inventory. A main barn, collapsed roof, structurally unsound. A chicken coop, also collapsed. And, this is an odd one. He squinted at a line of text, a genuine flicker of curiosity breaking through his professional monotone. One equipment shed, 40 by 60 feet, steel construction. The deed includes a specific and rather unusual covenant. He read directly from the document. Said shed, having been sealed by Franklin Thorne on June 4, 1954, is to remain undisturbed and unopened. This covenant is attached to the deed in perpetuity and can only be voided by the unanimous consent of all heirs of Franklin Thorne, or by the sole action of a direct heir residing on the property as their primary domicile. He looked up at me. Franklin Thorne. That was your grandfather, correct? I nodded, my heart starting to beat a little faster. Grandpa Frank. He died when I was 5. I remembered a tall man with a gentle laugh and hands that felt like worn leather. He was the one who taught me how to skip stones on the pond. He was the one who sealed the shed in 1954. So my brothers couldn't open it? I asked. Legally, no. Not without your consent, and even then it would require a court filing. Given its unique legal status and the fact that it hasn't been opened in over 60 years, it was assessed as having zero value. An antique curiosity. Your brothers, it seems, were focused on assets with clear, immediate market value. They didn't open it because they couldn't, and they didn't care enough to try because it wasn't easy money. They took the tractors and left the puzzle box. I see, I said. The hum of defiance in my chest was growing louder. It was starting to sound like a plan. A crazy, desperate, probably stupid plan. But it was mine. I looked at the pen, then at the paper that would sign away my name from the land. I looked back at Mr. Caldwell, who was already starting to look impatient. I'm not signing, I said. He sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of disappointment. Elara, I must advise you, this is unwise. The tax lien is significant. The county will eventually seize the property. You have no resources. I have a place to live, don't I? I countered, the idea taking shape even as I spoke it. The house is still there. I am a direct heir. If I live there, it's my primary domicile, right? He looked stunned. Technically, yes, but the conditions. The house has been vacant for years. There's no power, no running water. It's not habitable. I'll make it habitable, I said, a surge of something hot and powerful flooding through me. It might have been fear, but it felt like courage. And as a resident heir, I can open the shed. Mr. Caldwell stared at me for a long moment. He took off his glasses and polished them with a silk cloth from his pocket. It was a gesture of profound exasperation. Elara, what do you think you're going to find in there? Rusty tools? A family of raccoons? It's a shed. It's been sitting for almost 70 years. It's a tetanus risk, not a treasure chest. My brothers took everything else, I said, standing up. The leather chair gave a final sigh of relief. They were so sure of what was valuable. They were so sure of what everything was worth. I looked him straight in the eye. They forgot the shed. I think I'd like to see what's inside. He didn't have a response to that. He just slowly shook his head as I turned and walked out of the office, leaving the pen and the paper and the sensible option lying on his desk. The air outside, thick with city exhaust and the smell of hot asphalt, had never smelled so much like freedom. I had no money, no plan, and no idea what I was doing. But I had a destination. I was going home. The bus ride was a journey through descending layers of civilization. It started in the heart of the city, all concrete and glass and hurried people. Then it moved to the suburbs, with their neat lawns and identical houses. Then, slowly, the spaces between towns grew wider. The strip malls gave way to solitary gas stations. The manicured lawns were replaced by overgrown fields, the neat rows of trees by tangled, unruly forests. I watched the world change through the greasy window, my own reflection a ghostly passenger staring back at me. I had a single backpack with everything I owned, a few changes of clothes, a toothbrush, the worn paperback I'd been reading for a month, and an envelope with $217, my final allowance from the state, and every dollar I'd managed to save from part-time jobs. It felt like a fortune and nothing at all. The bus driver announced my stop with a gravelly shout. "Stockton Corners! End of the line, kid!" I was the only one who got off. The bus hissed and pulled away, leaving me in a cloud of diesel fumes and profound silence. Stockton Corners wasn't even a town. It was a crossroads with a boarded-up general store, a post office the size of a closet, and a single, flickering gas station sign. My family's farm was another 4 miles down a county road. There were no taxis, no Ubers, no friendly neighbors rushing to offer a ride. Just me, my backpack, and the long, straight stretch of cracked asphalt disappearing into the heat haze. So I started walking. The sun was high and hot. The air was thick with the buzz of insects and the sweet, cloying smell of sun-baked weeds. It was a different world from the city, a different world from the sterile, air-conditioned houses I'd been living in. Here, life was loud and messy and everywhere. My thin city sneakers were not made for this. Within a mile, I could feel a blister forming on my heel. The straps of my backpack dug into my shoulders. A part of me, the tired, cynical part that foster care had so expertly cultivated, was screaming, "What are you doing? Go back. Call the lawyer. Sign the paper. Take the bus back to the city and get a job at a coffee shop. Be sensible." But another part of me kept walking. With every step, I felt like I was walking not just towards something, but away from something. Away from being a case file. Away from being a problem to be managed. Away from being a ghost in other people's houses. The pain in my feet was real. The sweat trickling down my back was real. This road, this sun, this journey, it was mine. I passed mailboxes shaped like fish and tractors, their paint peeling. I passed fields of corn that seemed to stretch to the edge of the world. A beat-up pickup truck rattled past, the driver a silhouette behind the dusty windshield. He didn't slow down. This was a place where people kept to themselves. I thought about my brothers. Mark, the pragmatist, who saw everything in terms of profit and loss. David, the charmer, who could talk his way into and out of anything. They had been here. They had walked this land, not with reverence, but with a calculator. They had looked at the towering oaks my great-grandfather had planted and seen only bored feet. They had looked at the barn where I'd pretended to be a knight and seen only a liability to be demolished. They had seen a farm, but they had never seen a home. My grandfather, Franklin Thorne. What kind of man seals a shed for 70 years? What was he protecting? Or what was he hiding? The lawyer's words echoed in my mind. An antique curiosity, zero value. But the legal language of the covenant felt different. It was specific, deliberate. It was a message sent across time, a lock waiting for a key. And the key, it seemed, was me. A direct heir, residing on the property. He had created a loophole only someone desperate enough or faithful enough would ever think to use. The sun was starting to dip toward the horizon when I saw it. The rusted archway over a gravel driveway, the letters spelling out Thorn Farms, barely visible beneath the rust and creeping vines. My heart did a strange flip-flop in my chest. I had arrived. The walk up the driveway was like traveling through a tunnel of green. The trees on either side had grown into each other, their branches interlocking overhead, creating a canopy that filtered the evening light into a dappled, mysterious glow. The gravel was gone, swallowed by weeds and moss. And then the tunnel opened up, and I saw the house. Mr. Caldwell's words had not prepared me. Disrepair was too gentle a word. It was a skeleton. The porch sagged dramatically to one side, like a weary old man leaning on a broken cane. Windows were boarded up, but the boards themselves were rotting, and a few had fallen away to reveal gaping black squares. The paint was a distant memory, with only a few stubborn flakes of white clinging to the weathered gray wood. It looked haunted. It looked like it had been holding its breath for a very long time. I dropped my backpack on the ground and just stared. This was it. This was my kingdom. A ruin on a throne of weeds. The sensible part of me screamed again, louder this time. This was a mistake, a huge, monumental mistake. But then I looked past the house, across the overgrown yard. And I saw it. Standing apart from the other collapsed and broken buildings, about 100 yards from the house, was the shed. It was exactly as the document described it, a simple, rectangular building of steel. But the description didn't capture the presence of it. It was made of corrugated metal, but it wasn't the cheap, flimsy kind. These were thick, heavy-gauge panels, their surfaces oxidized to a deep, uniform russet brown. There were no windows, just one large, double door on the front, and across the seam of those doors, a thick, brutal line of metal had been laid down. Not a chain, not a padlock. A weld. A heavy, ugly, unyielding bead of melted steel fused the doors to each other and to the frame. It was an act of absolute, unequivocal closure. It didn't look like a shed. It looked like a vault, a tomb, a time capsule. Grandpa Frank did this. He had stood here, with a welding torch in his hand, and laid down that scar of fire and metal. He had sealed this place away with a finality that was breathtaking. Why? I walked toward it, my feet sinking into the tall, damp grass. The air grew cooler as I got closer, as if the metal building was radiating a chill. I reached out and laid my palm flat against the steel. It was cool and rough, the rust like a fine grit under my skin. There was no handle, no knob, no way to get any purchase. Just that impassive, welded seam. A line drawn in steel, a sentence without an end. I felt a strange sense of connection to the man I barely remembered. He had left this for me. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. My brothers had seen a worthless, rusted box. They saw an obstacle. I saw a message. I saw a question. That night, I didn't even try to get into the house. I unrolled my sleeping bag on the less slanted part of the porch, using my backpack as a pillow. The world went from gray to black, and the sky exploded with stars. Without city lights, the galaxy was a brilliant, messy spill across the darkness. The night was alive with sounds. The chirping of crickets, the deep baritone of a bullfrog, the rustle of something small in the grass. It should have been scary. I should have been terrified. But I wasn't. I felt purposeful. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me where to go, what to do, who to be. I was here because I had chosen to be. I was sleeping on the porch of my own broken house, under a sky full of my own stars, with a 70-year-old mystery waiting for me in the morning. I pulled the sleeping bag up to my chin, the blister on my heel throbbing in time with my heartbeat. I was home. And the work was about to begin. The first order of business was getting into the shed. This proved to be a far more difficult task than my optimistic, sleep-deprived brain had imagined. The weld was not a simple tack. It was a thick, industrial-grade bead that ran the entire height of the double doors. My grandfather had not been messing around. He wanted this place to stay shut. My first attempt was laughably naive. I found a heavy, rusted crowbar in the collapsed remains of the barn. For an hour, I wedged it into every conceivable crack and seam around the door, pulling with all the force my 110-pound frame could muster. The crowbar bent. The shed did not. The only result was a set of deep scratches in the rust, and a new collection of blisters on my hands to match the one on my heel. Defeated and sweating, I sat down in the grass and stared at the impassive steel wall. This was going to require more than brute force. It was going to require tools, and tools required power, and power required money. I checked my wallet. $184 left, after the bus ticket and a bottle of water. Not exactly a tool-buying budget. My exploration of the house was equally grim. The front door was swollen shut, so I squeezed through one of the broken window frames, showering myself in rotten wood and dead leaves. The inside smelled of damp, decay, and mouse droppings. Every surface was coated in a thick layer of dust and grime. Furniture, what little was left, was draped in white sheets like a room full of ghosts. I lifted a corner of one. A sofa, its upholstery chewed through and spilling stuffing. My brothers hadn't even bothered to take the furniture. It wasn't worth the effort. In the kitchen, I found a small victory. The old hand pump for the well was still there, bolted to the edge of the soapstone sink. I gripped the cold iron handle and began to pump. 1, 2, 3 strokes, nothing. 10, 20, a groan from deep in the earth. 30, 40, a rusty cough and a sputter. And then a gush of water. It was brown and smelled of sulfur, but it was water. After letting it run for 10 minutes, it cleared to a pale, drinkable-looking stream. It tasted of iron and earth, the coldest, sweetest water I'd ever had. That small win was enough to fuel me for the rest of the day. I found a bucket, and for hours I hauled water. I cleaned one small room off the kitchen, a pantry, maybe, scrubbing the floors and walls until the wood shone, damp and clean. I found an old metal-framed bed, rusted but solid, in one of the upstairs rooms and dragged it down. It would be my room, my base of operations. The next day, I walked the 4 miles back to Stockton Corners. The gas station had a small, dusty convenience store attached. The man behind the counter was old, with a face like a crumpled map and eyes that had seen it all. "Need gas?" he grunted, not looking up from his newspaper. "No, sir. I need to know where I can rent a generator and an angle grinder." That got his attention. He slowly lowered his paper and looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time. He took in my dirty clothes, my determined expression. "You the Thorn girl?" he asked. I was taken aback. "Yes, how did you know?" "Word gets around," he said with a shrug. "Heard you were back. Heard you turned down your brother's offer." He gestured with his head toward the back of the store. "Tool rental's in the back, but you'll need a deposit. Cash." My heart sank. My meager funds wouldn't cover a deposit on a coffee mug. "How much?" He named a number that was more than I had. I must have looked as defeated as I felt, because his expression softened just a fraction. "What's a little thing like you need a grinder for, anyway?" "I need to open something," I said, not wanting to give away too much. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "The shed?" I just nodded. He let out a low whistle. "Frank Thorne's vault. Haven't thought about that in years. Your granddaddy was a strange bird. Sealed that thing up right after the war. People said he went funny in the head." He stroked his chin. "Said he was protecting it." "Protecting what?" I asked, leaning in. "Never said. just welded it shut and told everyone to mind their own business. And in this town, people are good at that. He stood up, a decision made. All right, here's what we're gonna do. I'll waive the deposit. You pay the day rate. But I want to know what's in there. You come back and tell old Earl what all the fuss was about for 70 years. Deal, I said, a wave of gratitude washing over me. His name was Earl. He was the first person in years who had offered me help without a form to fill out. Getting the generator and the grinder back to the farm was an ordeal. I ended up making 2 trips, carrying the heavy, awkward equipment a mile at a time, leapfrogging my way down the county road. By the time I had it all on the porch, my muscles screamed and the sun was setting. The next morning, I was up before dawn. I wheeled the generator as close to the shed as I could get it, filled it with gas from a can Earl had given me, and pulled the cord. The engine sputtered to life with a deafening roar, shattering the morning peace. I plugged in the angle grinder, put on the safety glasses I'd found in the rental box, and took a deep breath. The grinder felt heavy and powerful in my hands. This was it. I hit the switch. The blade spun with a high-pitched whine. I touched it to the welded seam. A shower of brilliant orange sparks erupted, illuminating my face in the pre-dawn gloom. The noise was incredible, a screech of metal on metal that vibrated through my bones. I pressed harder, following the thick bead of the weld. It was slow, grueling work. The grinder bucked and kicked in my hands. Sparks flew into my hair and down my shirt. The smell of hot metal filled the air. Inch by painstaking inch, I cut. The sun rose, turning the sky from gray to pink to blue. I worked on, my focus narrowed to the tiny, glowing line of molten steel I was carving. My arms ached, my ears rang, but I didn't stop. I was a surgeon, performing a 70-year delayed operation. After what felt like an eternity, with a final, jarring screech, the blade cut through the last section of the weld. I turned off the grinder, and the sudden silence was deafening. A thin, dark line now ran the full height of the door. My heart hammered in my chest. I put the grinder down and placed my hands on the doors. I pushed. For a moment, nothing happened. My heart sank. Had I missed a spot? Was it rusted shut? Then, with a deep, groaning protest, a sound of metal surrendering after decades of resistance, the right side door moved. Just an inch. But it was enough. I wedged my fingers into the gap and pulled. The door scraped against the concrete floor, the sound echoing in the vast, empty landscape. It was heavy, far heavier than a simple steel door should be. Slowly, I pulled it open, then the other. I stood at the threshold, peering into the darkness within. The air that rolled out was not the damp, musty smell I expected. It was cool and dry, with the faint, clean scent of oil, old wood, and something else. Something chemical and sharp, like ozone. I fumbled for the flashlight I'd brought from the house and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, and I gasped. This was not an equipment shed. It was a workshop, but not like any workshop I had ever seen. It was immaculate. Tools hung on pegboards in perfect, neat rows, their chrome surfaces gleaming, their outlines drawn in white paint. Wrenches, screwdrivers, calipers, everything in its place. Along one wall was a massive lathe, under another, a drill press and a milling machine, all covered in thick canvas tarps. They weren't farm equipment, they were precision instruments. In the center of the room, taking up the most space, was something large and lumpy, completely shrouded by a massive, custom-sewn canvas cover. It was the size of a small car. But what drew my eye was the back wall. It was dominated by a huge wooden workbench. It was clear of tools, except for one thing placed dead center: a steel ammunition box, the kind soldiers use. It wasn't locked with a padlock, the latch was simply down. On top of it, taped to the lid, was a single yellowed envelope. My name, Ilara, was written on it. My blood went cold. The flashlight trembled in my hand. That wasn't possible. My name, written in a place that had been sealed before my parents were even born? I walked forward, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The floor was clean, swept concrete. No dust, no cobwebs, no sign of animals. The place was hermetically sealed. I reached the bench and stared at the envelope. The handwriting was a strong, masculine script, faded but clear. I peeled it off the box. It was unsealed. I slid my thumb under the flap and pulled out a single, folded sheet of paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a birth certificate. Mine, and tucked inside the fold was a small brass key. A skeleton key. I didn't understand. How could my birth certificate be in here? I looked at the ammo box. My name was on the envelope, but who wrote it? I looked around the silent, waiting workshop. The feeling of being watched was immense. This wasn't just a discovery, it was an invitation, a test. I looked at the birth certificate again. Then it hit me. The envelope wasn't for me, Ilara, the person. It was a label. This box was for the person named on this document. It was a contingency plan. My grandfather hadn't known my name. He couldn't have. Someone else put this here. But when? How? The only way to find out was to open the box. I looked at the latch. It wasn't a standard lock. There was a small keyhole set into the clasp itself. The brass key in my hand was a perfect match. With trembling fingers, I inserted the key and turned. There was a soft, satisfying click. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, there was no treasure, no gold, no jewels. The box was filled with notebooks, dozens of them. Black hardcover, journal-style notebooks stacked neatly. And on top of the stack lay another envelope, much thicker than the first. This one was addressed in the same strong handwriting as the envelope on the lid. But this one had a different name on it. It said, "To my son, Robert." Robert, my father's name. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. I lifted the envelope. It was heavy. I sat down on the cold concrete floor, the flashlight beam creating a single, lonely circle of light in the vast darkness of the shed. My back was against the workbench. I opened the flap. Inside were not just letters. There was a thick stack of them, tied with a faded ribbon. But there was also a photograph. I pulled it out. It was a black and white photo of a young man in a military uniform. He was handsome, with a serious expression in my father's eyes. But it wasn't my father. I turned it over. Written on the back? Franklin Thorne, U.S. Army Signal Corps, 1945. My grandfather. Young, vital, and a world away from the gentle old man of my memories. I picked up the first letter from the stack. The paper was thick and brittle with age. I unfolded it carefully. The date at the top read, June 5th, 1954, the day after he sealed the shed. "My dearest son," it began, "if you are reading this, then the worst has happened, and I have failed. I am gone, and you have been left with a legacy of questions. I cannot apologize enough for the secrets I have been forced to keep, but I hope, by the time you finish these letters, you will understand. You may not forgive me. I am not sure I would, in your place. I wasn't my father, but I kept reading. I had to know. When I came back from the war, I was not the same man who left this farm. I saw things, Robert. I worked in cryptography and signals intelligence. I saw how easily truth could be hidden, how messages could be sent in plain sight, and how the world was full of codes waiting to be broken. I came back here, to the quiet of this land, hoping to forget. But the world does not let you forget. In the early 50s, I was approached by some old contacts from the service. They were worried. Not about the Russians, not in the way you see on the news. They were worried about something closer to home. About technology about information, about who would control it. They were a small group of engineers, thinkers, mathematicians. They believed the future would be a war fought not with bullets, but with data. They saw the coming of a connected world, and they saw the danger in it. They saw that a person's life, their finances, their identity, their secrets, could one day be stolen with the push of a button. My mind was reeling. This wasn't about a farm. This was about something much, much bigger. We decided to build something, a failsafe, a system completely disconnected from the power grid, from the phone lines, from everything, a way to preserve information, to protect it in a place that no one could reach electronically, an analog sanctuary in a digital world that didn't even exist yet. This shed is not a shed, Robert. It is the first node, a prototype. We built it to be an impenetrable box, both physically and legally. The covenant on the deed was my contribution, a piece of legal code to protect our physical one. I looked around the workshop, the lathe, the milling machine. They weren't for fixing tractors. They were for building something else. And the large object under the canvas? We each built one. 6 of us, scattered across the country. 6 silent vaults, waiting. Inside we stored the tools, the plans, and the seed of our idea. We were going to build a private, secure network for communication and storage decades before its time. We called it the archive. But we were discovered, not by the government, but by a man I had trusted, a member of our own group. He didn't share our idealism. He saw our creation not as a shield, but as a weapon. He saw a tool for blackmail, for theft, for control. He tried to take the project for himself. When we refused, he threatened to expose us, to brand us as spies, as traitors. We had a falling out, a violent one. I came home, terrified. I knew he would come for this place, for the research I had stored here. I couldn't destroy it. It was too important. So I hid it. I sealed the shed using the most permanent method I could think of. I laid down that weld like a gravestone. And I began to live a different life. I became a simple farmer. I buried my past, and I prayed it would stay buried. The notebooks in this box contain all of it. My research, the schematics, the encryption keys, the locations of the other 5 nodes. Everything. I am entrusting it to you. If the world has become the place I feared it would, if information has become as dangerous and as valuable as I predicted, then this knowledge is a terrible power. It can be used to protect, or it can be used to destroy. It can make you a very rich man, or it can get you killed. The choice of what to do with it, son, is yours. Burn it all and live a simple life. That is the safest path. Or you can finish what I started. Find the others. Activate the archive. The world may need it. That is the hardest path. I do not know which is right. I only know that I am sorry for placing this burden upon you. Your loving father, Franklin Thorne. I sat there in the circle of light, the letter trembling in my hand. I was breathless. This was my grandfather, not just a farmer, but a visionary, a secret keeper, a man who saw the future and was terrified by it. My father, Robert, had never read this. He had lived and died on this farm, thinking his father was just a quiet, peculiar man. The letters, the notebooks, the entire legacy had been sitting here, waiting, while my father struggled with debt, while my brothers grew greedy and cynical, while I was lost in the system. The secret hadn't passed to my father, it had skipped a generation. It had landed on me. I felt a wave of dizziness. The weight of it was crushing. Burn it, he had said. That is the safest path. And it was. I could take the notebooks, throw them in a barrel, and light a match. I could sell the land to my brothers, take the pittance they offered, and disappear. No one would ever know. It would be easy, sensible. I cried. I'm not sure for how long. I cried for the grandfather I never knew, the brilliant, haunted man who built a fortress of secrets. I cried for my father, who never got the chance to understand his own father. I cried for myself, the lost girl who had just stumbled into a story so much bigger and more dangerous than she could possibly imagine. When the tears stopped, a cold, clear certainty settled in my chest. My brothers thought this land was worthless. The lawyer thought it was a liability. The world thought I was a nobody with nothing. They were all wrong. This wasn't just land, it was a sanctuary. This wasn't just a shed, it was a node. And I wasn't just an heir to a pile of debt, I was the heir to the archive. Grandpa Frank had offered his son a choice: burn it or build it, the safe path or the hard path. My father never got to choose. My brothers would have chosen the selfish path, sold the secrets to the highest bidder. Now, the choice was mine. I stood up, my legs stiff. I picked up the flashlight and shone it on the large object under the canvas cover. With a new sense of purpose, I walked over and grabbed a corner of the thick, dusty fabric. I pulled. The canvas slid off with a soft whoosh of displaced air, revealing what was underneath. It wasn't a car. It was a machine. A beautiful, complex, terrifying machine. It was a bank of servers, but not like any I had ever seen. They were analog. Instead of silicon chips, there were intricate mechanical counters. Instead of wires, there were pneumatic tubes and complex gear trains. It was a mechanical computer, a data engine built of brass and steel and bakelite. It was a masterpiece of forgotten technology, and on its central panel was a single, large, red lever, currently in the off position. Below it, a label maker tag read, Main Power. He didn't just store the plans, he built the damn thing. I looked from the silent, waiting machine to the box of notebooks in my hand. The choice. The hard path or the easy one. For 6 years, my life had been decided for me. I was told where to live, what to eat, who to be. I was given sensible options and clean breaks. I was a passenger. Not anymore. I walked back to the workbench, placed the letters carefully back in the box, and closed the lid. I picked up one of the black notebooks and opened it to a random page. It was filled with my grandfather's strong, dense script, interspersed with complex diagrams and mathematical formulas. It was a language I didn't understand, but I knew I could learn. I would not burn it, I would not sell it, and I would not run. My grandfather built a fortress to protect a secret. My brothers stripped a home for profit. They all made their choices. Now it was my turn. I chose the hard path. I would stay. I would learn. I would finish what he started. I would protect the archive. My choice was made, but the reality of it was daunting. I was an 18-year-old high school dropout with $200 and a set of unsolvable-looking notebooks. Finishing what my grandfather started felt less like a noble quest and more like trying to build a spaceship with a stone axe. But a choice is a powerful thing. It's a seed, and I was standing on the most fertile ground for it. The first step was survival. I couldn't decode my grandfather's life's work if I starved to death or the county seized the property. My days fell into a rhythm. Mornings were for the farm. I cleared the path to the house. I tore down the collapsed chicken coop, salvaging any usable lumber. I spent 2 full days just cleaning the main floor of the house, battling dust bunnies the size of actual bunnies, and evicting a very surprised family of mice. It was backbreaking, thankless work, but with every bucket of dirty water I threw out, the place felt a little more like mine. Afternoons were for the shed. The shed, which I now thought of as the archive, became my classroom. I would sit on the cold concrete floor, one of my grandfather's notebooks open in my lap, and I would read. At first, it was gibberish. Differential gear-based logic gates. Pneumatic tube data transfer protocols. Babbitt bearing tolerances for high-speed computation. But my grandfather, for all his genius, had also been a teacher. The first notebook was a primer. He started with the basics of mechanical engineering, of electricity, of logic. He wrote as if he were explaining it to a novice, to his son, the farmer. He was teaching from beyond the grave. I bought books with my dwindling cash, a Physics for Dummies from the secondhand store in the next town over, an old high school algebra textbook. I read by flashlight until my eyes burned. Slowly, painfully, a few of the concepts started to click into place. I learned that the giant machine wasn't just a computer. It was a secure server and a printing press all in one, designed to create and store encrypted physical documents. It was a way to prove ownership, identity, and truth completely offline. One afternoon, a week into my new life, a sleek black sedan I did not recognize rolled up the driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. It wasn't the county. This was a city car. A man in a suit I recognized, one of my brother Mark's lawyer friends, got out. He looked at the house, at me in my dirt-streaked clothes, with an expression of profound distaste. "Elera?" he called out, not stepping off the gravel he'd just churned up. "Mark sent me. He wants to know why you haven't signed the papers." I walked toward him, wiping my hands on my jeans. I felt a confidence I didn't know I had. This was my land. He was the trespasser. "I'm not signing," I said. He sighed, a mirror of Mr. Caldwell. It seemed to be the standard reaction to me. "Listen, your brother is being generous. This place is a teardown. He's offering to take a massive loss off your hands. In a few months, the county will foreclose for the back taxes, and you'll get nothing. Zero. This is your last chance to walk away with your dignity." "I like it here," I said, my voice even. "I'm staying." He actually laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Staying? Here? Doing what? Farming dust? Your brother David wants to bulldoze this whole place, put up a weekend housing development. He's got investors lined up. Don't be the sob story that gets in the way of progress, kid." The words hit me like a physical blow. Bulldoze it. Destroy the house, the trees, the archive. They didn't even know what they would be destroying, but they'd do it for a profit. "Tell my brothers," I said, my voice dropping into a low, cold register I didn't recognize, "to stay off my property." He stared at me, his smirk fading. He saw something in my eyes he didn't expect. He saw I wasn't a scared little girl anymore. I was the guardian of a secret. "You'll regret this," he snapped, getting back in his car. He spun the tires on the gravel as he left, spraying dust everywhere. A parting shot. His visit lit a fire under me. They weren't going to just wait for the county. They were going to push. I had to move faster. The tax lien. That was the sword hanging over my head. I went back to the notebooks, searching for something, anything, and I found it. Tucked into the back of the third journal was a hand-drawn map of the farm. Several locations were marked with an X. One was in the middle of a field. Another was under a specific, ancient-looking oak tree. And a third was marked with a star, right under the floorboards of the archive itself. Next to the star, a simple note: Contingency Fund. My hands shook. A contingency fund. My grandfather, the master of planning for the worst. Getting under the floorboards of the shed was impossible without dismantling the machinery. But the oak tree, I knew that tree. It stood on a hill at the far edge of the property, visible from the house. I took a shovel and started walking. The tree was even bigger up close than I remembered, a giant of the woods. The X on the map was marked at the base of the north side, between two large exposed roots. I started digging. The ground was hard, packed earth and rocks. An hour in, my shovel hit something with a dull thud. Not rock. Metal. My heart hammered. I dug faster, my hands raw, ignoring the pain. I cleared the dirt away to reveal a metal box, similar to the ammo can in the shed, but larger and heavier. It was locked with a simple, sturdy padlock. I didn't have the key. I spent another 30 minutes just beating on the lock with the back of the shovel, until, with a groan of tortured metal, it broke. I lifted the lid. It was full of cash. Neat bundles of old bills, 50s and 100s, wrapped in waxed paper and sealed in glass jars. And on top, a small, leather-bound ledger. I opened it. The first entry was from 1955. My grandfather had been systematically skimming money, small amounts, for years. Selling off a calf for cash here, a cord of wood there. A secret, off-the-books savings account. He had been funding his secret war for decades. I sat back on my heels, the enormity of it washing over me. He had left me everything I needed. The knowledge in the shed, and the means to protect it. I didn't count it all right away. I just loaded the heavy box into a wheelbarrow I'd found and covered it with a tarp. As I pushed it back toward the house, the sun setting behind me, I felt my grandfather's presence more strongly than ever. He hadn't just left me a burden, he had left me a path. He had left me a chance. The next morning, I walked the 4 miles to Stockton Corners, but this time I didn't feel like a refugee. I felt like a landowner. I walked into Earl's gas station and placed a stack of 20s on the counter. "I need to pay the day rate for the rental," I said. "And I'd like to buy the generator and the grinder. And that old pickup truck you've got sitting out back with the for sale sign on it." Earl stared at the money, then at me. His crumpled map face broke into a slow grin. "Find something interesting in that shed, did you?" "You could say that," I said, grinning back. "And Earl? I need to find the number for the best lawyer in the county, not the cheapest, the best." He nodded, already reaching for a worn-out Rolodex. "I think I know a guy." That's when the real work started. I paid the back taxes, all of them, in cash. The stunned look on the county clerk's face was worth every penny. I had my lawyer, a fierce bulldog of a man named Peters, send my brothers a cease and desist letter that made my own property line feel like an international border. There was a flurry of angry phone calls, which I let Peters handle. The housing development was dead before it was ever born. I had secured the perimeter. Now, I could focus on the mission. The notebooks were my Bible. I spent my nights studying, my days working. I learned to weld, practicing on scrap metal from the barn, until I could lay down a clean, strong bead. I learned basic electronics, how to clean and service the intricate workings of the archive's machinery. I brought the house back to life, room by room. I fixed the porch. I replaced the broken windows. I even planted a small garden. The archive was no longer a dusty relic. I cleaned every gear, oiled every moving part. I studied the schematics for the pneumatic tubes that my grandfather had planned to run between the buildings, a physical internet of air and paper. I hadn't turned the main power on yet. I knew, instinctively, that was a step I couldn't take back. Flipping that switch would be a declaration. It would mean the archive was active, and I wasn't ready. Not yet. One day, while working on the main console, I found another secret. A hidden panel held in place by magnets. Inside was one last journal, one my grandfather had kept separate from the others. This one wasn't about engineering. It was a diary. The entries were sporadic, dated over decades. He wrote about my father's birth, the joy and the terror of it, knowing the secret he was carrying. He wrote about my grandmother's passing. He wrote about his fears of the man from his group, the one who had betrayed them, a man he only ever referred to as Cain. He wrote about seeing the first personal computers on the news and feeling a cold dread. He was seeing his nightmare come to life. But the last entry was the one that broke my heart. It was dated a week before he died. His handwriting was shaky. "I am old," he wrote. "The farm is failing. Robert is a good man, a better man than me, but he doesn't have the heart for this fight. He doesn't see the shadows I see. Maybe that's for the best. I have failed. The archive will die with me, a silent monument to a fear that the world has now embraced as progress. I look at my granddaughter, Ilara. She has my eyes, a spark of the old fire, but she is just a child. What a terrible thing it would be to lay this burden on her. And yet, what a powerful thing it would be if she were strong enough to carry it. I will not choose for her. I have hidden the path. If she is meant to find it, she will. If not, then let it all turn to dust. He hadn't failed. He had trusted. He had trusted in the bloodline, in the land, in the possibility that someone would come along who was stubborn enough and desperate enough to look past the rust and see the value underneath. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. He saw me. Even as a small child, he saw the spark in me. He didn't give me the burden, he gave me the choice, and he trusted me to make it. I walked to the main console of the archive. I looked at the big red lever. I was no longer afraid. My brothers had wanted to possess this land. My grandfather had wanted to protect it. I finally understood what I wanted. I wanted to build on it. I took a deep breath, gripped the cold bakelite handle of the lever, and pulled it down. There was a low hum, a click-clack of relays, and then the machine began to whir. Lights I didn't know existed flickered to life on the console. The pneumatic tubes hissed. The gear trains began to turn, a quiet, steady symphony of mechanical thought. The archive was awake. My work isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. I have 5 other nodes to find, 5 other legacies to uncover. I have my grandfather's adversary, Cain, or his descendants, to worry about. The world my grandfather feared is here, and it's more connected and more vulnerable than he could have ever imagined. But I'm not alone. I have his knowledge, I have his resources, and I have his legacy of stubborn defiance. This farm is no longer a ruin, it's a headquarters. This house is no longer empty, it's a home. And I am no longer a lost girl. I am the keeper of the archive. My brothers thought they were taking everything of value. They were wrong. They left me the only thing that ever truly mattered, a choice. The choice to build something instead of taking something. The choice to protect a legacy instead of liquidating it. This story isn't just about a shed. It's about what we choose to see. Is it a worthless ruin, or is it a foundation? Is it an obstacle, or is it an opportunity? Is it an ending, or is it a beginning? If you've made it this far, thank you. I know this was a long story, but it's a story I had to tell. Maybe it resonates with you. Maybe you've had a moment in your life where you had to choose the hard path, where you had to see the value in something everyone else had written off. If you have, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments what your shed was. What was the forgotten thing that ended up changing everything for you? This channel is for us, for the people who find treasure in the trash, who build futures out of the ruins of the past. If that's you, subscribe. Join this community. Because my story is just one. I know there are thousands of others out there waiting to be told. And I promise you, I'll read every one. You're not alone in this. We're building our own archive right here. An archive of resilience, of hope, and of second chances.
Okay. You've been procrastinating all day. That's fair, Emma. Where are you from? I'm American Runes. Okay, I think I rearranged this slightly. Oh, thanks for the heart me and the heart puffs too, Ash. Okay. That's great for you. I wonder if I move everything down. Oh, this is multiple tables put together. That's actually kind of like, yes, that I just saw that too, Ash. Thank Thank you so much. Perhaps Oklahoma. Clues are indecisive. I'm dying. Interesting. So if you put all the tables together, it turns into a conference table. That's kind of cool. That's all I got. I'm off to sleep. Thank you for existing. Oh, thanks so much, Ash. Have a great night. Is this good enough? I don't know if it is. Never mind. Oh, wait, no. I got way too excited. It didn't even work. Ooh, I see how this works. Okay. Nice to meet you. We just start here in talk with 9 hours. Oh, that's awesome, Runes. One time I woke up to an infomercial after you signed off. I was so mad. I'm so sorry. That sounds terrible. That sounds awful. Wait, maybe I do this. Because if they said any chair works, right? Does this work? It does.